And you have got to try that superb log because that is so cool. When I was trying to figure out how to do these pens, I was extremely rough watercolor paper that I'm going to make something that functions properly for them.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Calligraphy Masters podcast. This episode is a bit different. It's not with a calligrapher, but somebody who does stuff for calligraphers. And with this episode, I want to start a new series on the podcast. This series won't be released on Mondays, and it's probably not gonna be every week, but from time to time, I'll get people, not exactly calligraphers, but which I think still are important, and I think their stories might inspire you or help you. And today's episode is about the EZA pens and the guy who makes them. This episode was recorded last year, and today when I got the files on my computer to edit the podcast, I haven't heard from him for a very long time. I put the files on the computer and I went out. I had some stuff to do. And when I looked my phone, he wrote me a huge message letting me know that beginning of this year, he retired from commercial lettering. And I don't know, I'm not sure. I haven't asked him if I can share this information, but basically he did some crazy changes. I don't know if they're for good or bad. I really hope it's something that he needs and it's for the good. But basically how the message finishes is, as life progresses, I will continue making pens for people who request an EZA pen. Most of my interest in visual arts will be with drawing, painting, woodworking, and gardening. Hand lettering is something I will no longer focus on or put any efforts into. I don't know, guys, this podcast is different. It was special to me. I'll let you listen to it and I'll share some more stuff on the end of the podcast. Please welcome to the podcast Allan Ariail. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. How are you doing, mate?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. Hello.
Yeah, this time differences with the zones. It's a bit messy, but yeah, we're here. How are you doing?
I'm good. See, so when we initially talked, I told you I had a commercial art background and I decided to retire so I could concentrate on pens, but I got an emergency call at 9 p.m. last night. So when we're finished with this, I have to do a 6-letter word where it's going to take me till 3 in the morning. And this thing that I still do is my background. It's commercial lettering, and commercial lettering is different than calligraphy. You know, I see the most gorgeous compositions and just masters doing all different styles by hand. And commercial lettering is something where you have to do a very legible mark and of the same name and probably like 20 different styles in a very fast turnaround time. So the pens are connected with that trade in the way I worked, which was a lot of quick layouts, very fast hand movement writing, a way to translate ideas. And I used markers for the longest time throughout most of my career because markers allowed me to change the style, the weight, the variation to meet all these presentations, these deadlines. And the problem with markers is as I matured through the trade, I couldn't get these real finite details. And that's when I started getting interested. I knew what master calligraphers were, but I wanted to search out, and I found a really good, one of the area's leading masters, Reggie Azell, and I contacted him early on. And he was such a nice person. He allowed me in his home and he explained for many hours about dip pens and, you know, traditional tools that I didn't understand how to use them. So I took his classes, a couple of his year-long classes, and I was like the worst student because my interest was trying to understand how people were holding their pens, what they were doing, just all these technical aspects of lettering. And it wasn't about doing composition or making something. I wanted to find out what these people were using, what their backgrounds were, what they were able to do. And it was a completely different world. So that's when I started making pens, and that was a long time ago. So everything I'm doing now it's connected to that time when I contacted Reggie, but it goes back to using markers, and it's associated with speed and deadlines and advertising. And I had a very unusual background because I worked in an ad agency doing custom lettering for a creative director. And this is back before IMAX and all that stuff. And you had to draw all this type out. It was industrial accounts, but that taught me about contrast and composition of these letter forms for use for headlines. And then that evolved into a packaging position for a corporate headquarters in Illinois. And that I was doing labels where I was sketching out all of these labels as if they were little book designs. And that allowed me to get into the advertising art studios. And at that point in time, that's where all the illustrators, were all the people that did lettering, and all these people I'd see in source books. That was where you had to be to really do a lot of lettering. So I got into an ad arts. I worked on a commission and draw basis, and eventually I started freelancing. After a few years, I started contacting all these people in various packaging studios. So what happened is I had a number of art reps who were giving me work, and then I was being contacted by package design studios that were in the Chicago area. And these were very long hours, and this is where that whole thing comes in, where you have to translate ideas very fast. If you're talking to somebody, you've got to come up with an idea or some way to convince them that maybe these letter forms should be used. And it's quick thinking, quick sketching. So when I have these pens now, everything I'm doing with them, when I do these little scribbles and stuff, it's all quick. And it's trying to figure out how to do these fast movements without restriction. And when I watch the masters like Yves and Victor Kams and all these guys that are just, they can move it. I can't do that. But when I tweak these pens, or when I keep on going through all these different prototypes, I'm trying to understand how to make that tip move that way. And there's people that could take it way beyond my imagination. And it's so cool to see that. But the pens are connected with commercial art background. I'm never going to be somebody that's like a Theosone or some calligraphy master that's lettering on buildings, or that's a different world.
Well, and, it doesn't really matter because your pens are used by calligraphers, and obviously somehow you have love for the letters. I mean, if you're doing pens, I guess you are part of this community. It doesn't really matter if you do calligraphy. And also, it's not you. In my opinion, you don't need to do like this master beautiful calligraphy. Like, it's 21st century, and there's so many styles and categories of calligraphy that I guess it's more about the love of letters and stuff like this. But you mentioned Chicago, and can you tell just a little bit about yourself? Like, where are you from? How old are you? And
well, I grew up in the Chicago area, and my father was a printer, so there was always a graphic arts connection, but he was also a carpenter. So at an early age, I really understood how to use tools and different construction methods and stuff like that. And somehow when I was a child, I knew I wanted to be involved in graphic arts. I didn't know what it was. When I initially started, I wanted to be an illustrator, and then I met illustrators, and I knew I didn't have what they had, which was this phenomenal drawing ability. But yet somehow I gravitated towards type and handwriting. When I was in grade school, handwriting was taught. And by the time that ended, getting ready for high school, we had to learn how to use a typewriter. Everything was becoming mechanical. So I always felt like I had some connection to handwriting in a way. So that resulted in college. I was doing some lettering, but it wasn't anything like commercial lettering. It was posters or whatever it was. It was actually really horrible looking stuff, but that allowed me to get into the graphic arts profession, working for an advertising agency in Milwaukee. So, there was always a connection, but it wasn't until I got this like gopher job where it was a horrible job. I was doing I had to get into an ad agency somewhere. And these people allowed me in. It was like, I forgot if I was making $4 or $5 an hour. It was really bad. And I was the guy that would clean the photostat cameras. I would go run errands, whatever. But there was a creative director, and he knew from looking at the posters I did that I had some skill to help him with his hand lettering. And he was doing stuff for Wisconsin State Fair and all these like Brandt coin machines and industrial stuff, JIKs. And all this stuff required very bold weight letter forms. And he was teaching me about contrast, teaching me how you can cheat letter forms. It was, none of this stuff was using a typesetter or anything like that. It was drawing stuff by hand. And you could really, legibility and contrast, left to right read. And all that stuff is so important. And by understanding this technical construction of these letter forms, and I was in a workshop once where Luca Barcelona was talking about a trees and filtering light. And that's the same principle. It's like you can't have these contrast breaks, especially if you're trying to read something. So I had at an early part of my career, I had an understanding of how to draw type and how to apply it to advertising, but then I had to get into another position that would allow me to do a lot of stuff so I could show people that were art reps and get into the big ball game, which is the illustration and custom lettering ad art studios. And ad art studios don't exist anymore. One ad art studio I was in, it had illustrators their work was exhibited in Society of Illustrators. They had storyboard artists there that were phenomenal. And amazing photo retouchers and some people that did hand lettering. It was a mix of all these phenomenally talented people. And that was a place where you had to meet deadlines. I mean, it was all about, you had to be really fast or else you were out the door. You were useless to them. So I would get inspired by seeing what other people would do. And then at around this time, there was the possibility of Macintosh computers. It was like prehistoric stuff, but Illustrator was coming into the game, and I had to understand how to use Adobe Illustrator. So I got a beta version of that, and I started working in it. I had a buddy that was a programmer, and he had a really good technical mind, and he would help me with questions that I would have about trying to do certain manipulations in Illustrator. And after about 6 months, I had really become very highly skilled in that. And that's what allowed me to break away from the advertising art studios. Being on site, I could go out and freelance. And I was one of the few people in Chicago at that time that was using Illustrator exclusively for production art. And that time was really, that was kind of a horrible time because the output was through Linetronic output. There were only a few service bureaus, and you had to send files over like an 1800 baud rate modem that would take an hour and a half. And like, as soon as the file would be transferring, like 3 minutes left, the phone line would cut off and you'd have to do it again. And then you'd get this Linetronic output and you would still have to like paste it together and give an art director this big board of lettering. And, eventually that evolved and it became where you could just send people film. And, but everything, I was doing work for like beverage accounts, food accounts. Chicago's a big food area. So everything that I was doing was for print reproduction. And it was so unusual because when I would go to a client, I would walk down the street, I would see lettering that I did on a bus. I would see it on banners on Wacker Drive. I would see it on the side of a building. And then I'd go home and I'd see my lettering on TV. And then I had a artist rep. This guy was really good. And his direct account was with Franco. And Franco had all the McDonald's and Taco Bell lettering. And for a number of years, all my lettering was on the windows of Taco Bell and McDonald's, where it was like 59 cent Big Mac or whatever. And it was so great because no matter where I was going, I would see my lettering. And to be in that position, it was all about being able to turn stuff over in a quick time frame. So having Illustrator, I was able to get work that other people weren't able to produce in a quick turnaround time at that point. But then everything changed. Everybody started understanding how to use Illustrator, and it was a very unusual time. So I constantly used markers, and later on in life, I didn't understand what the calligraphers were. I just didn't understand how they were getting these finite details, just gorgeous stuff. And a marker wouldn't do that. So I had to figure out how to make a pen to work for my hand. And I really believe there's some connection with my early years of handwriting. I wanted to understand how to move a pen as if I was handwriting or whatever it was. And all the lettering I had done for commercial work was very slow, you're working on a keyboard, trackball, Wacom pen, whatever. It's not the same as handwriting. There's something there where it's a slow process. So as I've gotten older, I've really wanted to reconnect with that writing or that movement. So, these pens what's happening now with the pens that I'm making is this particular shape. I know this is a pretty common shape, but what's happening is when I'm using this pen, I'm grasping it up here. It's got a large ball and it's got texture on it, and it allows me to move it around. And then it's got this very narrow section in here as if it's a paintbrush, and allows me to turn it backwards where I've got the tip pointing towards me. And when I use these pens, it's as if it's a drumstick where I'm twirling it and doing things and shifting the angle of the metal touching the paper surface. And this all has to do with being fluid with the movement of the wrist, pressure, whatever's necessary to get this thought down or get a few words or just an image down in a very short period of time. A lot of these, when I test these pens, everything I'm doing is just like a quick scribble, and it has some really beautiful marks in it, but then I throw it in a box and set it aside, look at it later, then recycle it or whatever, because it's all about trying to understand the movement, trying not to have a restriction. And that no restriction is tied into being able to use markers. Markers, you can move them any way you want, and after I talked to Reggie, like all these, he was showing me Mitchell tips, he was showing me speedball, he was showing me point and pen, all this stuff. And I could never move that stuff the same way. There was some kind of like, it would catch, or there's something that, for me, it just didn't feel natural. So I started bending metal. I had like folded, almost, it's like these square folded pieces of metal that were they were the pre tips of this EZA tip, because it was metal that folded, it was metal that bent, but yet there was something missing with the finite hairline of it. I couldn't get a real fine line off of that. And I kept on trying so many different shapes, and I gave up on that after a while. And then I started having more success when I started bending metal to a point. And what I'm doing now, it's taken thousands and thousands and thousands of variations. Early on, I would work on a pen like 4 or 5 hours. I'd know in 2 minutes if it was a piece of crap or if it was something to continue pursuing. And you go through these long sessions where I had no clue I knew what I was trying to achieve, but I had no clue how to get there. And even now with the tips that I make, right now I'm tweaking one of the designs where I'm trying to get more bend into it. So it's a constant search for freedom of movement, so you can get what's in your mind or what's in your eye done in a very fast manner of time. And that's, the pen, it's always going to be this way. I'm always going to tweak the designs or change them slightly, but there's some really good designs that I won't stray too far from, but I don't know what the answers are for everything. Even here's an example of this little odd thing right here. This is epoxy putty. I use this to repair a deck. on my house. And I figured this is really great stuff because I could shape it to my fingers. And I just wanted to see what would happen if I had a traditional pointed nib in here, just moving with my fingers, no shaft back here, just something where I felt as if my finger is touching the paper surface. And this was an okay idea, but I think there might be something in here to pursue with the EZA tips. I don't know when that's going to happen. I'll keep playing with this. And it's the same way with this shape. This shape is something that I did like 10 years ago, only it was shorter. It had a bigger groove in here. And I recently went back to that because it's starting to make more sense with this larger textured area, with the way my fingers grip that pen for movement, or just, if I'm barely touching this thing, I want some kind of groove into the surface to allow me to twist it, because the pen's all about like changing angle. So this side edge makes contact. The more side edge, the larger the mark. And then you have to also be able to like shift the pen upwards, get a hairline. And it's not, what's different with this tool, if you look at a speedball, you're not really moving a speedball here, there, wherever. You're trying to keep a fairly consistent pressure on the flat edge of that tip. And this is different than that. It's just something that it requires a lot of movement, a lot of switching of directions. And this is, at this point in time, I'm kind of limited because I'm just starting to learn how to do video, and I really have to post videos to explain to people, don't be afraid to press this metal hard into the surface or whatever. I don't think people are aware of the full potential of the shape of the tip.
Well,
so
I don't think it's necessarily to make videos. I mean, so many calligraphers use your pens. You can just ask people to make like few videos for you, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was even thinking to ask Stu Swan to make some stuff, because I guess he has those pens. As you say, Mr. Comes as well. I can ask them and I'll do it. But I was curious, how long ago did you actually start making the EZA pens? Like,
you're talking about maybe like 15 years ago when I started working with the metal. And then I did like about 10 years of all these different kinds of tip shapes. And I also belonged to the Chicago Calligraphy Collective. So I would get together with people and show them what I had. And a lot of those early pens were like just disasters. It's like people, they couldn't find, it's like what I was hoping to achieve, it wasn't there. So I've been through all this like trial and error, and I'd have to refine. And if somebody would like take the pen and just think, I can't get this thing to work, I'd have to try to figure out why it wasn't working. So I went through all these variations, and then I was in a workshop with Yves, and this is the thing with life, there's a bit of luck. You have to be in the right place at the right time, but you also have to have some drive and some commitment to do something. So I had one of Yves' workshops a long time ago, which was, I think it was a composition or something. And I was fascinated by his gestural writing because it reminded me of handwriting, freedom of movement. And he came into Chicago and he was doing a workshop, and I got involved in that. And I brought the pens with me. And initially there was no interest. He wanted to concentrate on what he was teaching. So the last day of the workshop, we're packing up, and some of the participants in the back corner I gave them the pens to play with. And then I heard one of them call me. She's going, "Allan, come over here. Yves is using your pens." So I went over there, and then it's like he was having a really good time making these long stroke movements and all that stuff. And then we connected, and I was trying to explain what the pens are. He never saw anything like it. And so that I was in the right place at the right time. If I had never taken that workshop, who even knows if we would be talking right now. And when he took those prototype pens back with him, I got overwhelmed with email, and I didn't know what I was doing, because here you have a prototype, and then you have to figure out how to make it into a production item where you could reproduce it. And I didn't have the technical skills to do that. I didn't understand the machining involved. And there was a friend who just started talking to me about technical aspects of refining the metal edge, and he was very helpful. And so that was the point where I had to, about 4 years ago or so, that's where I really had to start learning how to make the pens. And when you're talking about a pen as a product, something that can reproduce, you have to have so much accuracy in the assembly process. If I'm off by 0.01 millimeter, the thing is junk. When I'm pressing the plates together, there can't be any flaws. And so I had to get a vertical mill. I had to get a fairly decent lathe with digital readout on it to be able to machine things fairly accurately. And I wish I would have known this early on, because it would have saved me a lot of frustration early on. So everything I do now in this pen process, so I've been at this, selling these pens for about 4 years. I'm still trying to figure out how to refine the assembly fixtures. When I drill into this metal, I'm trying to figure out how to lock it in so there's no shifting. And it's a constant technical thing. I'm not using CAD milling. I could use CAD milling, but it's just, I've seen so much beautiful machine work done by these people that they're not using CAD systems. So you could do it manually. It's just being able to read on a digital scale of what you should shift here or there. And, to do this stuff, there's a lot of technical aspects of it. It's just not making the pen. And then after I spend like a couple days milling new fixtures and I assemble a nib, the thing might not work for the adjustments I'm making. So there's all these you're working in very micro changes over a long period of time. And there's sometimes I have real failures with what I'm trying, and then I go back, set it aside, and then pick it up later and I see something good in that. So I'll go back to that specific point and rework it. And it's with the tips, you've got to have some bend, some forgiveness to it. There has to be almost like a suspension feel to it, but the thing has got to move. And that's the trick of it, and I don't think the pen will ever be outsourced, because I can't imagine somebody trying to assemble this thing and testing it the same way I test it. Everything I make, I test. And I know within a few strokes if I've got to refine the edge more, or if I have to file off too much metal, the thing is useless. So everything I'm testing, and sometimes I hit it right on, like spot on, and it's such a great feeling where I make this tip and it's just within a few strokes, it just flows beautifully. And I'm going, yeah, this one, it's like heaven. This nib is like heaven. And then I'll go downstairs and I'll make another one. And it's like, what is, it's human error, but yet there's still an accuracy and a technical aspect associated with it. So that's, and as you get older, you've got to have challenges in your mind. And this thing about all the technical aspects of making a pen, it's really good. It's good for my mind, and it keeps me active. And it's like a long game that I'm playing to try to figure out how to perfect this thing. And in the reality of it, I don't think I ever will perfect it. I'll get versions that are really good, but perfection, I don't know what perfection is, because you always keep on striving to change things or make it better, or looking at something that's older. So it's a different tool. It's not going to be what, to try to do traditional hand off of it, forget it. It's a different tool that's made for writing or just expressive ink marks. And, sometimes I wonder if people are buying the pen if they're expecting it to be like a Mitchell or whatever, and it's not. And you could, when I play with this stuff, I can mimic what some pointed pen expert would do. But if you look at everything with a microscope, it's not the same. But yet from a distance, it's like, hey, that's a pretty nice imitation of pointed pen. And the thing of it is to do that movement, I'm doing it in a really fast manner. I can't even do that with a pointed pen. So it's allowing me to move this thing, almost like dancing.
Does this mean that the inspiration behind the pen is taken from pointed pens?
I love pointed pen work, and I see the most beautiful flourishes off of that. And when I was working in the ad art studio, that was the most difficult at early on in life, for me, that was the most difficult task to accomplish. It was nearly impossible. I couldn't understand how these art rep would come in and say, we need this for a wine bottle. You got like 3 hours, whatever. And I couldn't, I'd look at examples and I couldn't figure out how these people were doing it. So that I always want to try to figure out a way to be able to do a lettering style like that. And I know people that are really good at point and pen. I can't hold it the same way they're doing it. Even when I've made a ton of different oblique holders and I practice with them because I want to know what a point and pen's going to do. I want to know what it's going to do in my hand. And no matter how many times I screw around, put rubber, change the shape on it, do whatever, I'm never moving it as fast as when I do it with an EZA. So that thing about movement and being able to mimic something like a beautiful H or something that looks like, some point and pen master did, that's something that I could accomplish with an EZA because the tip has some suspension in it. I'm not going to have a restricted movement. And, my goal isn't to be a point and pen master, but it's to be able to write some words or something like somebody would, and then switch a style or do whatever. I'm into this thing where I just want to switch different letter form shapes and use a combination of elements that I've seen in black letter, point and pen, whatever, and mesh that all together. So being able to move that tip as if I was somebody that's a point and pen master is very important. And I can do it with that tip because the metal, even though it's sharp, it's got a little roundness on the very tip of it. And when the metal's squeezed together, I could get a hairline line off of it. It's not going to matter which direction I'm moving the pen in. And there's some strokes that I could do backwards letter forms, strokes that are just, they're impossible to do with a point and pen, but yet I could pull that off with an EZA. So it's all about trying to, if I hear something funny on TV or just in the background noise or something, I want to capture that thought or whatever it is in a really quick way. And I'm going to use whatever styles are appropriate for a fill-in of the area or going into contrast or legibility or whatever it is. So being able to use a tool as if it's a multi-tool where you could pull off all these different styles, that's something that I think the pen does. And that's still associated with a marker where I was doing marker and I'd have to come up with like a thick to thin script or a handwritten script or just bold weight letter forms, and then you go in and you refill and refine the edge. That marker allowed me to create multiple styles within a few hours or whatever. It's the same thing with the pen. There's that commercial connection where I've got this tool that I want it to be more like it could do a variety of styles. It's not specific to one style. It's just something you could use for a variety. The more you understand about the side edge of the metal contacting paper, the more you'll be able to pull off a different visual effect. So,
is there some specific papers that are better for the EZA pens? Or
well, right now,
or at least that you recommend to use with those pens?
hard pressed semi-slick surface is what I can get the finest hairlines off of. Just, it's like I can mimic. I do a lot of like warm-up sessions where I'm doing caps, cap letters in a script form, and I'm getting beautiful hairlines off of that. If I go to a paper that has texture or a softer surface, the ink will bleed out more. And then I'm also noticing that there's some inks that just they're too thick to work with the pen. I've been using fountain pen inks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start, I know Yves uses gouache and other people have, and they're very successful with that. The thicker the paint media, the more it has to be cleaned out with water or dipped. I use a cup that has a toothbrush on it, very soft toothbrush. It's got water filled up past the toothbrush. When I start noticing the ink isn't flowing right, I dip it in the water, I rub it against the toothbrush, wipe it off on a piece of paper towel, and then I reload it. And whenever I reload that tip, I wipe the excess off of the outside of the metal so I could get a really clean a really clean mark on the surface. If I have excess on the outside of the metal, I'll end up with a blob somewhere. So it's no different than somebody flicking, filling a tip and flicking it to get the excess off. It's just the way I use it. So paper surface does matter. And I've done some stuff on extremely rough watercolor paper where I can hold a fine line. It's really cool because the effect comes out all deckled. I even letter on really cheap laser print paper. The fine hairlines are not going to be the same on that, but it's good practice stuff because it's recycled paper. I can recycle it again. And it just gives me the notion if this tip's working or if I can move it. And, it allows me to make a lot of mistakes or whatever. And there's not a high financial risk with that paper because it's easily accessible. And, sometimes I'm reluctant to use really good stuff like Reeves or Arches or whatever, because I'm just scribbling and practicing, and that stuff's really expensive. But the results, the higher quality paper, the results are much better. I imagine if I did something on vellum, it would be even a higher level. So it's kind of common sense of what you have experienced before with materials and paper that you're using. It's going to be no different with my pens because the better stuff works better.
Yeah.
But,
okay, you say you've been doing it for like 15 years and you're kind of selling them for the last 4 years. What's the drive behind making the pens and keep making them and not stopping? Like, what's the motivation behind?
This is what the motivation is. Okay. It's making a tool that other people can use that might make their lives a little bit easier for whatever they're trying to achieve. There's no financial gain in this because it was investing in tools, whatever. It takes me like 2 to 3 hours to make a pen, even a cheap pen, because I've got to make it, I've got to mill all the parts, and then I test it. There's no quick, whenever I rush it, it doesn't work. It's pointless to try to think of doing more than a couple, 2 or 3 pens in a day. So I've resigned myself to the fact that I'm a very slow pen maker. But this is what's so great about it, and I never had this with commercial lettering. I did lettering that was on television for multi-million-dollar accounts. Creative director it's like after the artwork was sent off, the creative director could care less. It's like, so what? Big deal. So you did this lettering to me. So when I make a pen for somebody, I get the feedback I get is like, oh, this works great. It's so wonderful. And it's like, it's better than anything I experienced with commercial lettering. Okay. And it's knowing that I made something for somebody that I came up with the design of, that was in my head. And it's just something that they're going to find beneficial as they progress in the lettering arts. And that connection with people all over the world, I'm so fortunate to have experienced this because I don't think a lot of people do experience that. So the motivation, it's important to receive payment for making a pen because I've got supplies, I have electrical, I have insurance and all this other stuff associated with making it. But the real motivation is seeing how people use it, seeing, I sent Victor Cam some pens once and I saw some stuff he was doing and I was thinking, God, this is so great, watching that movement. And I sent Yves so many pens. He sent me an email once and goes, oh, I can't handle any more pens. And he shows me a drawer. It's like, oh, pens. But like I was trying to share ideas with him. And when I would see his work, it's like, that's so cool. And then there's other people that are they're phenomenal at it, and they'd be using a pen and I'd see something they'd post on the internet. And I was thinking, it's so neat to know that pen that they're using came from my workshop, but it's not, a lot of this has to do with talent too. I'm not like taking anything away from people's talent. It's just they've been able to take it further than what I can imagine. And that's a really great life experience. So I keep on doing this stuff.
Well, talent is indeed important, but the tools that you use are equally important in my opinion. I mean, I have lots of pens, but some pens are better than others, and with a good pens, you can express yourself much better.
Yeah. So, and we talked about this early on. I mean, I'm in my mid 60s now. So my time, and I don't mean this in a odd sounding way, but my time is limited to make these because there's going to be physical things and all these things that happen with age. So right now, I'm really involved in this because I know that there will be a time where I can't do it. So, I'm going to use whatever time I have remaining in a really positive manner to try to get more of these pens out there. And if it ever reaches the point where I can't do it anymore, somebody's going to have to look at this design and figure out how to, do something similar, whatever. What it is,
Have you considered having what is called someone that you pass on the knowledge for the craft?
I would do that. That's something I do think about quite often. I would have to teach somebody. I would have to spend time with somebody to teach them, and that may happen as I'm getting much older, so they could continue doing it. I researched this prior to doing it, and I got a U.S. patent on it. And you have to do research, and you have to make sure that there's nothing similar. And the thing that I didn't understand is there were no pens that were that design. There was nothing similar to it prior to submitting for the patent. So I think in the timeline of the lettering arts, it's an important tool, but when you look at the centuries of lettering arts, this is such a minimal time span. But I think there's something with that design that needs to be continued as decades progress, because it's a good design and it allows, and you have people that have been doing gestural and that lettering, so that's accepted. So it's something that fits into this timeline right now that needs to be continued much further into the future. So whatever happened, it's a positive aspect of the lettering arts, and no matter how small of a, just, I'm trying to come up with the right words, but there's stuff that has happened that is just way beyond, making a pen or whatever in the lettering arts, but it's a tool that I think has some value. So, when perhaps maybe like 50 years from now or whatever, there'll still be an EZA out there, and then somebody will research and go, this was the guy that designed this a long time ago. This was the design. Here, this is what it is now. This is what it evolved into. So I can't explain how that tool happened at this point in time or anything like that, but it does have a connection with somebody that was into the commercial art trade. And the commercial art trade had nothing to do with the calligraphy. They're two separate things. So, and then there's also the technical aspect of understanding how to build things, which is connected to woodworking early on. And, so whatever, it's a good thing. And here we are right now. So I'm on your podcast and we're discussing.
Last time we spoke, you told me something that, you said that some people are saying that your pens are too expensive. And I have something to say about this because I checked just before we started recording. I checked your website and I think you have some different versions, but if I'm not wrong, the most expensive one was like $50, right?
It's 40. The basic pen, which has the original flex tip in it, is 40.
Okay, so what I want to say is first of all, I don't own any of those pens, but I've seen people, my friends that use them, and also the reason that you're on the podcast is Stu's one. He talked about those pens, and if he recommended you, I totally trust him. So what I've seen just online, without having to write with this pen, I can guarantee 100% that this is a quality pen. It is unlike any other pen that I've seen. The most closest things that it looks like it's a ruling pen, but at the same time, it has nothing to do with the ruling pen. And also I want to say to the people who are watching or listening, even a $40 price, it's not an expensive price, because this is a unique pen, first of all. Second of all, you are doing everything by yourself, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're not a company, you're not a corporation. You cannot make hundreds or thousands of pens. So whenever some products is that unique and that good, like it cannot be cheap. I mean, for me, I think even $40 is cheap for this pen. For what it is, like such unique and quality pen, it can be much more expensive because
Yeah, but
there are some
right.
pens which are even more expensive, but people don't complain. So I don't know why
You know,
people.
the reason for the $40 was because over the years, some people have been very reluctant. And even myself with buying supplies, I wouldn't want to spend. I'd be a little reluctant of buying a $75 pen or whatever, and that is sort of a big investment. So I kept on trying to think of how can I make it where I wasn't spending a lot of time milling wood and so forth. So I cut off some time. I'm using a birch dowel rod that I get at a building center, and I'm tapering the end, and it saves me a lot of machining time from cutting raw lumber. So that's how I figured I could do a cheap pen, not cheap in quality, but cheap in a affordable way. And I've had a lot of people contact me about that. And this is the way I figure it. So they'll use that pen, and if they like it, then they'll want to get something that's a higher, they'll want to buy something where you could have interchangeable tips or whatever. So there's no loss. There's, like I said before, this is not a monetary thing. It's trying to get people more accustomed to it or whatever it is, and just trying to make the pen more well known. So it's not. I don't see it as a detriment in any way. It just allows access for people that are kind of reluctant and don't know about.
But as I said last time, my point is if somebody is saying that this is a too expensive pen, like nothing is too expensive. If you think of course I know like some people around the world, $40 could be a lot. Like
Yeah.
We live in a world that not everything is equal. But my point is even if you're a person whom like $40 is a lot, I guess everybody is drinking everyday coffee, spending money
Yeah.
on all kinds of stupid things. If you really want this pen, you save for like 1 week, 2 weeks, 2 months. It doesn't matter. If you really want the pen, you save and you buy it. Like
Yeah.
I think it's worth it, and it's worth 100% because you are doing everything by yourself, and this is unique, and it makes the price even more like because you're not a factory. There are no
No.
machines doing everything for you. Like you just said, you spent 15 years just. Okay, you spent 11 years before you started selling them. This means this is a lot of time just trying to figure out how to make this pen that good, And every dollar is worth it. I think $40 is nothing for this pen.
Yeah, but they're all the years in life, you can't predict what road you're going to go down. So the years involved trying to figure this out. I probably would have done that one way or another, even if I hadn't connected with the Eves or whatever, because I was trying to figure out how to make a tool to allow me to write. And that writing goes back to grade school where everything was handwritten. And somehow that was because of how everything changed in the world with technology, that got set aside. So whatever happened, I would have still been trying to figure out how to make a writing tool for my hand. So, all the hours involved, that was just something that happened in life. And, it's just that was a necessary step to get to the point where I can make the pen. But it is a lot of work. And I test every single pen. There's times where I think I've got an order to do for somebody. I'll test it and there's something not right in the metal edge. I can't even buff it out. I don't know what it is. And so I have to go redo another tip. It works like a charm the next time. So I know if this stuff was done in a factory on a production line, that wouldn't happen. You'd get some kind of piece of garbage out there that people wouldn't be able to move around or, so this is the handmade thing. With handmade, there's a lot more care that goes into the detail. With production. It's like you don't know what you're getting. You don't know who's producing it.
Then that's it. Like I mean, some pilot parallel pens cost between 10 and 20, $30, and they're manufactured in huge amounts. Like I guess it costs like few dollars just to make it, like probably $1-2, but they sell it for much more. So if there are people who think this is an expensive pen, it's not, guys. It's super cheap. Like for example, Do you have an idea how many pens have you done? Like, I don't mean like throughout all the process in figuring out, but from the moment you decide, okay, this is like a pen that people can write. Do you have any idea how many have you created?
Probably say about 10,000 pens.
10,000 pens. Wow.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
And a lot of those were just total failures. This is another, I forgot to mention this, but this is really important. So, okay, at the time where people are starting to show videos and all that, and I don't know if you ever saw this, there was a person, a calligrapher, he had a maybe Todd Swan pen, huge nib on it. And whoever this was, he was doing this beautiful flourish. He was doing these massive swells in the pen stroke. And that video was out there for a number of years. I could never find it again. So what happened when I was trying to figure out how to do these pens, I was buying all these maybe Todd Swan pens from a person in England that had wet noodle tips on them. And then I learned a lot. I learned how to repair vintage fountain pens and all this stuff. I was trying to understand how metal bent. And those early century pens had really cheap gold in it that was made for the common men. So everybody could buy these pens and write with them. And as years progressed, the gold changed and it wasn't as flexible. So there was something I was studying with all these antique fountain pens about how pressure would affect the swell. But no matter what I did or what I purchased or what I used with fountain pens, I could never get what I saw in that video with this person with the maybe Todd Swan doing these just gorgeous swells. So as I started bending metal, it was all trying to figure out some way to gravitate towards that. And now we're at this point in time where I have this one tip, this superb long tip. It is like, it surpasses what I saw in that video. And that has to do with understanding the amount of pressure to use, the shape of the tips, the way they're burnished, the tooth on the metal, all this stuff, the space between the tips, all that is important to the way that functions. So seeing that video, if I had never seen that video of that person with that fountain pen, I don't know if I'd be here discussing the pens with you right now. So that was an important part that I left out. It's not only the commercial stuff, but what I had seen with somebody using a 100-year-old fountain pen or dip pen or whatever it was. And that still resonates in my mind. So right now I have this tip where it's like when I use it, I'm thinking, damn, I surpassed what that guy was doing. This is so cool. Because I could get that swell even bigger and I could move it. And you know, that when I have success, it's so cool.
Can you do this with all the EZA pens, or is it a specific model?
Some of them I don't want that to happen because I'm afraid that people might bend the metal too much or whatever. There's a tip that I make, a shorter version, which is a little bit stiffer. But this one tip in particular, this long, superb tip, man, it's like, that thing is just, you have to use it, you have to have some understanding of a light touch. I don't think it's a beginner's tip because there's a certain sensitivity to it.
Mm-hmm.
But for anybody that's been doing hand lettering for a while and using dip pens, it's like it surpasses anything I've tried with a rose nib where you get these huge swells. It just, the feel of it is so nice. And it's just, man, it's such a great tip for just moving around and changing stroke weights or doing whatever. The freedom of movement with it is really cool. And as I keep on tweaking this thing, I'm making the tip sharper and sharper, which does these extremely fine hairlines. So you can take something that has an extremely fine hairline and then expand it to like almost like 10 millimeter or 11 millimeter width in an instant, just by tilting it.
I want to know, like, what's the difference actually between the pens? Okay, this says basic. This is like, is it like one is for the big?
That's got the original flex tip in it. That's done with I create that with a birch dowel rod. So I'm doing very minimal milling. It's got a nice finish on it. And that tip is glued into the pen body. So I don't have to mill aluminum threaded insert. It's saving me time on the technical construction.
Okay.
And the two pens below that have a superb short in there. That superb short is like a larger version of that tip. It's a little bit stiffer. It's more durable. You can move that you can move it on a paper surface without too much concern of it bending out of shape or whatever. The original flex tip is a really great tip, but it's a softer grade of metal. So if you have somebody that's got a really heavy hand, that might not be the best starting tip for them. But some people just, they don't have that heavy hand. They understand how to just grab something and move it and whatever. But if for somebody that's like using a lot of hand pressure, soft metal is not exactly the best tip. So you switch into something that would be a superb short, which is thicker metal, more durable.
So which model is for the heavy-handed people?
The superb short,
So
that would be a really good start for a heavy-handed.
which is it? Like this is basic?
It's the second, it's the two,
Essential?
right, the two in the photo next.
Okay.
The second one down, that's superb short.
Okay. And what about this one?
And that's a dual pen. And this is why I started doing the dual pen, because that pen has a threaded insert. It's got tips that could be exchanged. If a tip breaks, you could purchase a replacement or whatever it is. And here, the reason I started doing two pens is when I was there were many times I would make a EZA original flex tip for somebody, and I was thinking, oh my God, they might end up bending this. So then I would send them a tip that was a little bit stiffer without, I would end up sending them two tips anyway, just so they'd be on the safe side. If they were purchasing outside of the United States, I didn't want them to deal with a hassle of trying to get a repair tip or anything. So then I reached the conclusion, just do a pen that has two tips. People could decide what tips they want.
Mhm.
That way, if what they're using feels too soft or they don't like it, they can thread in the tip that's a little bit stiff or whatever. Then they'll have better success with it. So I'm trying to cover the base. So maybe if the pen doesn't work out initially, you have another option.
Yeah.
And some people that have purchased that, they want to go with, a much larger, it's like they know how to use it and they just want a larger tip and a smaller tip just for variation. So.
Mm-hmm. And what about these one? Okay, you hit dislike the different holders?
Oh, those are, those are really not necessary, but those are laminated. Sometimes people contact me and they want to see, a fancier pen body or whatever. But if you scroll down, all the way down, okay, that tip that's in the middle of that illustration, that's the superb long tip. That is the tip that I think that's the best tip I've made, because the ability to go from a hairline to something super thick or even get a little bit of texture, that tip will do it. And it's just, I don't know of any other tip that's like that. The one that's the furthest to the right,
this one?
and the one next to that, those both have a flat edge. And those are cool because what it is, it's almost like using an italic nib in a way, where if you touch that flat edge on the paper surface, you're going to get a very bold mark from it. And then you could rotate the tip around, and then you could have an arced side, which is going to limit the amount of metal contacting the paper. So it's, it's like a switch up nib where you can go back into like thick and thin just by rotating. So those are a lot of fun to play around with.
Okay. Is any of those pens available, or you make pens whenever people order?
I make them when people contact me.
Okay.
So, if somebody contacts me, if I'm not swamped making a lot of pens with a lot of pen orders, it usually takes me a few days. If I have a lot of pen orders going on, it could be 1 week or 2 weeks before I'm able to deliver them, because I'm only able to make 2 or 3 of them per day. If I have like 10 people contacting me, it's going to take a little while. So, it's a slow process to do it, but the quality of it is very high.
So how can people buy the pens? Is it via the website, or do they have?
Right, they go onto the website, and then it's got in an inquiry page, you would send, I'm interested in a basic or whatever. That would be Yeah, the inquiry, the last one, you would have to, there's a little message box in there. You would have to fill that in with your name and then you just hit the send. And I would receive that by email.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have had, some people tell me that there's a code that you have to type in,
Yeah.
that the webmaster set that up. And sometimes they get errors. I think that's the web service that I'm using. It's whatever you send me, it's going to go through because sometimes I get repeat messages. So I'm not the programmer for that website. It's just a hosting service.
Okay, I have a question. Is there any specific model that people are getting the most or that they love the most?
The ones
using?
that get the request for the most is the original Flex and Disco. This is probably due to seeing Yves videos.
Is it the basic one or essential?
Right. That's the tip in that pen.
Okay.
The tip in that pen is also made as a threaded tip where I'll work with an EZA Duo, but that's the tip that I get the most requests on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt that tip the metal might be too thin for some people with a heavy hand.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when I talk to somebody through email, I start getting an idea of what might work better for them. So every pen order I get, there's a personal connection in there where I'll have email contact with someone, and then I could kind of tell that I'll make a suggestion. Well, based on what you're telling me, maybe we should try something a little thicker, stiffer. And there's even times where I have 5 tips listed there, but sometimes after reading somebody's email or seeing an example of what they're doing, I might tweak a tip that's made especially for them.
Okay.
Because it's the amount to handle the amount of pressure they're using or the experience they might have. So that's the cool aspect of making pens, is that I can make something that is specifically for the person that's discussing the pen. And I think I'm knowledgeable enough at this point in time to tweak the metal or use certain layers or do whatever, that I'm going to make something that functions properly for them. So it's pretty cool to have that ability to custom make something for somebody. It's all about getting a good tool.
Last time I asked you, so you are up to make a discount for like 20 people, right?
Yeah, right.
So guys, like we discussed that I don't think the prices should be put down, but since I really want to support Allan, I love what he does. His pens are amazing. Just to encourage you guys, the first 20 people to order the pen from Allan will get 10% discount. And to get those 10% discount, just where I showed you on the website, when you do the inquiry, just write a comment with the code Calligraphy Masters, and Allan will know to give you 10% of the price. I don't support like putting the price down, but this is just to encourage you because I love his work and I just really want to support him. So if there are any people of you who don't have that problem with the money, please guys, go and get 1 or 2 pens for you. You will love those pens and you won't regret it. If you're someone who can't afford them, but you know people that might be interested, feel free to send them this podcast. And yeah.
I do have to say though, right now, I'm looking at these, I discussed this, I'm making a lot of mock pens out of cheap pine and some out of hardwood. And I really do think there's going to be a point in time where I start selling a pen that's like this. And the reason being is that this shape, Brody once told me initially early on, he said, your pens are too thick. The pen handles are too thick. Yves liked thicker pen handles because of a fatigue issue. He liked something to grasp onto. But I thought that was a really valid comment by Brody, because when I've used the pointed brush, a thin handle, I could rotate it. I could manipulate that real easy. And with this shape, this allows my hand, the way I hold it, it really allows me to rotate and switch the angles of metal. So this is something that's going on in my mind right now. I keep on doing these mock pens. I'll probably send some pens made out of pine to people that I've had contact with so they can try it. I want to get feedback on this thing, but I think eventually that's going to be something that I offer on the website, and it's a really good progression for the pen and the tip, which is changing from a straight shaft. So that's where I'm headed. It's like I cannot stop lettering with this thing right now. And if I show videos, if I'm lettering with this, people are going to go, "Why aren't you using the pen? The pen body that's on your website?" And then I'm going to have to explain, because this one, it allows my hand to just move it like a musical instrument. It's just so nice. So, you never know with this stuff.
Well, why don't you offer this holder as well in that case?
'Cause I haven't been able to duplicate. I don't know how to I'd have to build a duplicator to duplicate that shape.
Okay.
So everything's going to be a little bit different there. One person would get one thing that doesn't look like what somebody else has. And it's just, when you start doing stuff for reproduction, you do have to have some degree of duplication involved. So, but this is, maybe in a year from now, I'll figure out how to duplicate that. But I think that's a really good progression with it all. And it does tie into the tip. It's not just the pen handle, it's being able to move that tip. So, the thing in life is life progresses, but sometimes you look at things that were done previously and then there's a connection to it. There's no way of knowing. It's always like searching for things, looking at what was done previously, and then how do you incorporate the good elements of that? So everything keeps on morphing and changing into a better solution. And that's a fascinating aspect with the pens. I don't know what they're going to be from one year to the next.
Well, only the time will show.
Yeah.
Is there something that I haven't asked you, but maybe you wanted to share about the pens? I don't know.
We've covered, when we first were talking, I was going to go into this long spiel about my background in the commercial part of it. And what I thought was interesting was the time I came into it, it was pre-digital.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so different than what it is now, because you had artist reps and it was a totally different time. And I was so fortunate to be the age I am, to have gotten into it before everything started going digital.
I see.
And I got to watch the industry change, where people started using the computers, and then and what seemed to kind of kill that was there was a great recession in the US, and after that, food packaging became very safe, and the hand lettering thing was kind of like out the window, and people were doing a lot of typeset stuff. So I got to see the decline of what I was familiar with was the hand lettering. It became, people were using typeset stuff more safe, it's like very sterile, and that went on for a while. And when I think about that previous time, you can't go in the past or anything, but I think I was very fortunate to have gotten into something where it involved a lot of drawing. There was no Command Z back then. You had to understand, when I was inking lettering for production art, I would have to cut hand templates. So you would go over the template with a rapidograph pen, and it took forever to do a double outline on something. And then I would shoot photostats of it. I would retouch the photostats. I would make rub down transfers, do whatever. So there were all these things that they no longer exist. That stuff is, all that technical stuff, all that way art was created, it's out the window. It doesn't exist anymore. But I think all that stuff of understanding how to do stuff technically, it plays into what I'm doing with pens. There's some connection with it, with tweaking stuff, using different assembly setups and all that stuff. So if I hadn't have had that career, there would be no pens right now. There's some real strong connection with that pre-digital way of producing art that's connected with pens right now. And I don't know of anybody else that had a career that way. I think a lot of the people that started pre-digital, there aren't very many of them around right now. So it's boy, that was it was so cool to work in the ad art studio to see all these phenomenal illustrators, and then none of them are doing that stuff anymore. One of the world's most amazing illustrators who had been in society, now he does home remodeling. It's like all these guys that I knew, all these men and women I knew, they left the profession after a while, and I sort of still stayed in it. And I'm, as I mentioned earlier, tonight I have to work on. Someone contacted me, and I have to work on a logo, a 6-letter logo, and I'll be up till 2 or 3 a.m. And they contact me because they said, we can't find anybody else that understands legibility or whatever. So it's like I'm kind of a dinosaur with this stuff, and I still have this understanding of letter form, readability, and all that. And I'm watching everything change. It's like there's going to be a point in time where nobody even knows what that era was about. So if you get a pen, there's a connection with pre-digital with it. It's just, it's life experiences that go into making the pen. It's just not something that happens right away. There's all these life experiences that are connected with it, and it's a unique tool. And that's probably why there's not other tips made that way or nibs made that way, because of the guy who had this very strange career.
Well, thanks God that this guy had this career, because you created something unique, and I still don't have one. I'll get one soon, but
You will get one.
I already love it.
You have to have one as a follow-up to understand. We could talk about this, and you could see on video what it is, or you could look at somebody else. But until you actually dip it in ink, use it, and move it, you really don't know. There's no way of knowing what the pen is like until you actually have it in your hand and can experience some of it. And there's also a technical side to keeping the ink plates clean. There's maintenance on it, because you have a very thin space for that ink to flow through. So it's not like something that you could just like dip in ink and set it aside. You have to clean the pen. And I do mention this on the website, but it's boy, man, I was so lucky to, I'm really fortunate to have, have come up with this combination of pressure, metal bending, metal layers, and all that stuff that allows that tip to move in any direction on the paper surface. I mean, it's not a ruling pen. People say it's a ruling pen, and it's not, because a ruling pen does not bend. The whole thing is you could bend that metal, and it's like, I once said to somebody, it's like getting high when you're using this thing, because it's like you hit this mark, it's like, oh my God, that is so cool. But that's the pen. So
well, it is unlike any other pen, and this is super cool. Like you just heard earlier, he's done probably around 10,000, which means not many people have any of those pens. If you want to be one of those special people, the link will be in the description. Go get yourself a pen. As I said, the first 20 people which contact Allan with code Calligraphy Masters will get 10% off. And yeah. Thank you, Allan, for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Before for those of you who are on YouTube, if you are watching, please let me know if you own one of those pens, or if you never seen or heard anything about it. Also, let me know if you would like to have one or you're gonna order. With that said, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and as always, keep writing.
Okay, bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast, guys. As you see, this is a different kind of podcast. First time we have a pen maker. And let me tell you guys, probably I don't know, a few weeks after I recorded this podcast, Alan sent me 3 pens. Believe me or not, I was saving these pens for months. For months, they were sitting in the package. To be honest, I opened them like probably 2 months ago. I was saving them because I wanted to try them for before or after the podcast. I wanted to make a review, but the last year it's been crazy. Like that was also the reason the podcast was on hold. But now that I edited the podcast and the message I received from Alan, I don't know, I feel kind of bad. Mm, Alan is an amazing person. Once I finish my message right now, there's like 2-3 more minutes from the pod. It's not from the podcast. Like usually when I finish the podcast, we still speak with the guest. And I haven't asked him if I can share this, but I will do it because I want you to see what passion he has for the pens and how much he puts into them. So I really want to encourage you guys. If you don't have any of those pens, please go get some. You won't regret it. I promise you, you won't regret it. Those pens are amazing. I've been having a lot of fun with them. To be honest, I prefer this one. I think this is the basic one. This is the one I have most fun with. And actually, I'm able to write most with this. Those are also cool, but I haven't exactly figured out how to work with them. I'm pretty sure there are people which can produce amazing stuff with them. I just haven't figured it yet out. And yeah, as I said, there is a discount. I'm not sure anymore if this discount still works. You can try. The first 20 people can try, but I'm not promising. As I said, this was last year recorded. And yeah, the goal is not to get it cheaper, but really to support Alan. I don't know what to say, guys. I'll leave you to the last seconds of last 2-3 minutes of what we spoke after we finish it. Before I let you watch or listen to this, as always, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this podcast, like will be much appreciated. And please, guys, comment. From this week, actually from the episode with Yves, anyone who leaves comments on the episodes has a chance to win one of those. The first winner will be announced in 3 days from now, because I guess right now it's not Friday, but this episode is coming out on Friday. So I won't have the winner for Eve's episode, but next month, like in 3 days, I'll announce the first winner who will get one of the Calligraphy Masters alphabet prints. Too much talking, like, guys, I'm sorry. It's a bit confusing, but it's 1 a.m. here and it's been a long day. Like, subscribe, comment, keep writing. Love you guys. So,
Well, that was good. I don't know if I'm rambling on too much, but
no, don't worry. It's a great, like, I enjoy listening to everything, so it's good.
you know, and send me your address, and when I get done with my orders, I'll send you. You know what I'm going to send you? I'm going to send you one of these handles. This handle is kick. I didn't want to say this, but this is a kick-ass handle. This surpasses anything I've done because it's got texture grooves in it, and this shape for the intent of the design, this is right on the mark. But when I was doing the pens, it seemed like the way I can make more of them is with a straight shaft or whatever. That was an easier alternative. This takes more time, but it is so direct and it's right to the point. And anyone that's got skill, that's been learning for a while, they'll know when they touch this thing. Because man, this is really good. So this is what I'll send you, but I got to get your address.
Sure, I appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
And I'll make sure to promote good pens in the next few months, because like I think you deserve much more audience and people to get their hands on those pens.
Well, I appreciate you doing the podcast, and I briefly spoke about this. Every now and then in life, somebody helps me that is totally unexpected. Here's the thing in life: when you help someone, sooner or later it comes back to you, and I mean, there's something good will happen with both of us, and it just makes life better, And there's times where I try to help somebody, and you don't never expect anything, but something good comes out. So I really do appreciate it. I don't have the right words.
No, it's the pleasure is all mine, because like this world is fucked up enough, and like the least we can do is to help and support each other. Like we all are humans. We all have all kinds of crazy stuff in our heads in our lives, so it costs nothing to help some people. Like
and that's, I didn't want to discuss that, but we're in some serious trouble over here in the US, and it's like I don't want to be online with any of that. So the majority of my time is I'm concentrating on this pen, even though I'm well aware of what's happening. But I want to do something positive with my day, something positive. And there's people that are going way beyond that. When you look at how they're helping refugees in Ukraine, and it's like this pen stuff is nothing compared to that. But yet, if I make a pen for somebody and they have a good experience, it's better to do that than, go into some deep, horrible hole where,
of course,
I don't understand that. And it's from the time I'm at also. I grew up in the 60s and all that. I don't understand why there's so much hatred and stuff. But so by making these pens, I can share with somebody there's something good that comes out of it. And it's a much better way to spend whatever remaining time I have on the planet,
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
Oh, you're doing an amazing job, Allan, and I'm really happy that we had this opportunity to talk and have you on the podcast.
And you have got to try that superb log, because that is the tip. That is the tip. And I figured out how to make a really sharp point on that. Where it's like it surpasses that, maybe Todd Swan. I mean, my God. And I can imagine with somebody that's, I don't know if Yves will ever get, Yves doesn't want me to send him pens anymore because he has too many. But somebody that's really good, if they get that in their hands, it's like, look out. This thing it's a killer, man. It is, so I'm going to send you one of those and you can play with it. But that is the one. If I only have one tip, that's the tip. That is so cool. So,
awesome. I'm super excited about it. Can't wait.
Okay. We'll chat later.